welcome to Vantage this week, a show where we recap the highlights of the week gone by. In Syria, tensions are far from over. The rebels are consolidating power, but another conflict could erupt at any moment. There are two places where it could happen, with Israel in the south and with the Kurds in the east. And as Syria is staring at the beginning of another war, that's what we'll discuss and tell you why Donald Trump is trolling Justin Trudeau by calling him the governor of Canada. Google has also made headlines this week. The tech giant has unveiled a new chip which can apparently beat supercomputers. Why is it so powerful? And does the world really need it? All this and more lined up for you. Let's get started. The situation in Syria is set to be fluid, but it's closer to a powder keg. One wrong move and things could get ugly. It could escalate into another full-blown war. There are two places where it could erupt. One is in the south with Israel and the other is in the east with the Kurds. Let's start with what Israel is doing. Syrian military installations are under attack. They're being blown up by Israel. The Israeli army just released a video. It purportedly shows them blowing up weapon factories and even Syrian Air Force jets. Now, how would you feel in this situation? Imagine that you're a rebel fighter. You just ousted a tyrannical regime. You're working to consolidate your grip on power, but then a foreign nation enters your territory. They send troops into disputed border regions, and now they're blowing up your newly acquired military infrastructure. You can see why the Syrian rebels won't be happy with this. Israel says it is doing all this to secure itself. It says it does not want Syrian military assets falling into terrorist hands. But what they're doing also has side effects. It is likely to anger the new rulers of Damascus and perhaps encourage them to hit back. Even Israel's big brother, the US, is wary about this.
Again, the Israelis have been clear about what they're doing and why they're doing it. I think across the board, when it comes to any actors who have real interest in Syria, it's also really important at this time that we all try to make sure that we're not sparking any additional conflicts. That's also an important objective.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in West Asia again. It's his 12th trip to the region since last October, since the Gaza war broke out. But this time his focus is Syria. His goal is what he stated, to prevent additional conflicts. Israel is one potential spoiler in Syria, but Washington seems to be more concerned with another foreign actor, and that is Turkey. Antony Blinken flew down to Ankara yesterday. He met with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and their Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. Blinken's first goal was to get the Turks on the same page. While the US and Turkey are technically allies, they're both NATO members, they have been on opposing sides in Syria. The countries back separate rebel groups, and these groups have been clashing. We've told you about the Turkish interest before. They're dead against the Kurdish forces in northern Syria. Turkey has a large Kurdish population, and some of them want a separate country for Kurds. And Ankara has been fighting the separatist forces for decades. It believes that the Kurds in Syria are working with their brethren in Turkey. So Ankara has used the turmoil in Syria to go after the Kurds there. The rebels backed by Turkey attacked the city of Manjib this week. This city was held by Kurdish forces earlier. There were clashes in Manjib all week. Reports say that more than 200 people were killed. But a shaky ceasefire now seems to be in place in Manjib. However, the hostilities are spreading to other places. The new flashpoint is Deir ez-Zor. It's a city in eastern Syria. It was controlled by the Kurds, but now it seems they've been pushed out of this region. Turkey sees this as a victory against what it considers a terrorist group. So that's one side of the story. Turkey's battle against the Kurds, it's playing out. But the US sees things differently. Washington supports these Kurdish forces. In fact, they're a key ally in America's fight against terrorism, especially against the ISIS. And the ISIS is rearing its ugly head again in Syria. The Kurds helped the US defeat ISIS in the past, and Washington wants to keep using them. So it's a delicate balance. The US wants Turkey to stop fighting the Kurds so that the Kurds can focus on the ISIS. And that is part of why Blinken went to Ankara, to try and rein in the Turks.
We're very focused on Syria, very focused on the opportunity that now is before us and before the Syrian people to move from out from under the shackles of Bashar al-Assad to a different and better future for the Syrian people, one that the Syrian people decide for themselves. And we talked about how Turkey, how the United States, how other partners in the region can support those efforts. And I think there's broad agreement on what we would each like to see going forward.
Saving the Kurds isn't the only thing on Blinken's agenda. The US also wants to make use of Turkey's influence in Syria, of their ties to the new people in charge, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS. Washington doesn't have direct links to this group, but Ankara does. Turkey's Secret Service chief was spotted in Damascus yesterday, around the same time that Blinken was making his way to Ankara. Turkey also announced that it plans to reopen its embassy in Syria. The embassy has been closed since 2012. Now they want to reopen it. Turkey has appointed a temporary chargé d'affaires. It's clear that Turkey is trying to work with the new Syrian government. And the US wants to make use of this. They also want a seat at the table. So this is the situation. It's currently advantage Turkey. They have the ties to power. They are the ones backing attacks on the Kurds. And they are the ones best placed to avoid a new war. Will the US be able to convince Erdogan to ease the pressure, though? Or will Turkey push forward with its own agenda, risking even more conflict in Syria? We'll keep tracking the story as it develops. Israel has a new target. They have already leveled Gaza, they have a truce with Lebanon, and now Prime Minister Netanyahu has turned his sights to Syria. He's pounding them with airstrikes. The attack started on Sunday, almost as soon as Bashar al-Assad's regime fell, and it's continued well into this week. Some 350 airstrikes were carried out in the last 48 hours. 350 airstrikes. Israel has released footage of their operations. Take a look. And what are they targeting? Assets of the Syrian military. We're not talking about rebel factions or the Kurds. We're talking about the military of the fallen regime. Their research centers, their weapons factories, their ammunition depots, their naval assets, all of it has been destroyed by Israel. They used a combination of drones and fighter jets for this. Sites all over Syria were targeted, in Damascus, in Homs, in Tartus, in Palmyra, and in Latakia. And the damage is quite extensive. I'll show you the aftermath of two such attacks. One on a research center in the capital, Damascus, and second on Syria's naval fleet. Take a look. The entire Syrian Navy is gone. All those ships were sitting ducks for Israeli strikes. They say 80% of Syria's military capabilities have been destroyed. The obvious question is why? Why is Israel attacking Syrian military sites? It's basically a preemptive strategy. Israel says these military capabilities could fall into extremist hands or into the hands of pro-Iran groups, and they could use these weapons to attack Israel. So Netanyahu is not waiting around for that to happen. He says we'll destroy the weapons anyway. He also sent a message to the new regime in Damascus. Listen in.
We want relations with the new regime in Syria. But if this regime allows Iran to reestablish itself in Syria, or allows the transfer of Iranian weapons or any other weapons to Hezbollah, or attacks us, we will respond forcefully and we will exact a heavy price from it. What happened to the previous regime will also happen to this regime.
It's an opportunistic move by Israel. Netanyahu knows the rebels are busy rebuilding. They're more focused on internal issues. So what does he do? He takes the chance to defang Syria's military. But Arab nations are not impressed. They're accusing Israel of exploiting Syria's condition.
It cannot be accepted that any party, including the Israeli occupation, to exploit this opportunity to occupy the lands of another sovereign country. Syria's sovereignty has not been violated for any reason other than this Israeli violation.
Most of the world agrees with this. They may not call out Israel specifically, but they have demanded the protection of Syria's territorial integrity. And it's obvious why. Israel is following a high-risk, high-reward policy. They already control a piece of Syrian land. It's called the Golan Heights. Israel seized it during the 1967 war, and they've had control over it since then. But when Assad fell, Israel pushed beyond it, beyond the Golan Heights. They took over a United Nations buffer zone in the Golan Heights. It's just 40 kilometers from Damascus. Now, Israel says this operation is temporary and limited, that they have no intention of attacking the new regime, but the rebels may not see it that way. For starters, Israel's military is getting very close to them. Like I said, just 40 kilometers away. And secondly, Netanyahu is boasting about reshaping West Asia. He's openly taking credit for ousting Bashar al-Assad. And guess who believes him? Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. He's broken his silence on the regime change in Syria. Khamenei says it was plotted by Israel and the US.
There should be no doubt that what happened in Syria is the result of a joint plan between the United States and the Zionists. Yes, a neighboring government of Syria has played, is playing, and will continue to play a clear role in this matter. Everyone sees this, but the main actors, the principal agents, the real plotters, the masterminds, and the command center are in America and with the Zionist regime.
Now put yourself in the shoes of those rebel leaders. You have just established a new regime, but your neighbor has carried out 350 strikes on your land. He's destroyed your navy and missiles, and he's stationed soldiers very close to your capital. Would you feel threatened or not? Chances are you will. But the rebels have not lashed out at Israel yet. They are rightly focused on internal issues, on bringing back stability. But if these attacks continue, who knows? They can't just allow Israel to destroy Syria's entire military. These planes and missiles may have belonged to Assad, but the rebels stand to inherit them, which is why Israel's strategy is high risk, high reward. If they get away with it, it's one less enemy, or at least a weaker enemy. But if they don't, they could end up further destabilizing Syria. And remember, the last time that happened, ISIS was the winner. So the rebels have won in Syria. But now let's zoom out a bit. And look at the other big winner, that is Turkey. Their president Recep Tayyip Erdogan has claimed a major victory. For years he's been backing the Syrian rebels, and now that they've succeeded, he stands to gain.
Türkiye olarak bizim temennimiz
Our wish as Turkey is for our neighbor Syria to attain the peace and tranquility it has been longing for 13 years.
Erdogan made that speech on Saturday as Damascus was falling and Assad was fleeing. Erdogan was addressing a crowd in the city of Gaziantep. It's near the border with Syria. It is home to hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees. Erdogan was clearly pandering to the crowd, and they probably did not mind because Assad's fall was a victory for both these parties, the Syrian refugees and the Turkish president. Throughout the civil war, Turkey opposed Assad's regime. It was reportedly personal. Erdogan and Assad used to be friends. They even went on a family holiday together once. But things turned sour in 2011. When the Syrian civil war began, reports say that Erdogan made a personal appeal to Bashar al-Assad to go easy on the rebels. But Assad ignored him and unleashed a bloody crackdown. Erdogan is said to have taken this personally. He was furious that his supposed friend would shun his advice thus. So he began to publicly oppose the Syrian regime and started supporting rebel groups, most notably a group called the Syrian National Army that controls vast swathes of northern Syria. They were part of the latest offensive, the one that brought Assad down. They fought alongside the HTS, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Now, the HTS is a designated terrorist group in Turkey, so Ankara could not support them overtly, but they did support them with aid and supplies. Look at the HTS stronghold. It's the region of Idlib, and Idlib borders Turkey. So by keeping these supply lines open, Erdogan gave them tacit support, and now their victory is his victory.
kapımızı açarken de
The Damascus regime never realized the value of the hand Turkey extended. It did not understand what it meant.
daima buydu.
You heard what he said. Assad never valued the hand Turkey extended. That happened last year. Erdogan reached out to Assad. It was a pivotal point in the war. Assad could have negotiated with Ankara, perhaps cut off the rebel supply lines. But he did not respond to Erdogan's overtures. Perhaps that was the beginning of his downfall. Reports say the rebels then reached out to Ankara. They showed Turkey their plans and asked for a free hand. And it seems Turkey agreed. And the results are there for the world to see.
Bundan sonraki süreçte farklı etnik ve
We will continue our work to ensure the voluntary and safe return of Syrians and for the reconstruction of the country. Turkey, which gave a hand to its Syrian brothers in their difficult days, will also be with them in the new chapter that opened in Damascus.
Suriye görmek istiyoruz.
Cut through the diplomatic jargon. What do you hear? Point number one, Syrian refugees are going to leave Turkey. It is already happening. In fact, Syrian refugees started gathering at border checkpoints last night. They want to go home. And this will be a massive relief for Erdogan. His country's economy is not doing well. The refugees were seen as an added burden. So their departure will relieve some of the pressure. Point number two, Ankara will help with reconstruction, which means big money for the Turkish construction industry. Incidentally, Erdogan has ties to the construction sector, so he might just make a pretty penny during the reconstruction activities. And finally, point number three, Turkey plans to, and I'm quoting, Turkey plans to be with the Syrians during this new chapter. Basically, they want to have a say in what happens in Damascus. Considering their long-term support, this is entirely possible. And this is Erdogan's prize. He is the winner. Now let's turn to the losers. Apart from Assad, obviously, there are two big ones, two big losers, Russia and Iran. We'll start with Russia. Putin came to Assad's aid in 2015 at the height of the Syrian civil war. He rescued the regime. Russia has military bases in Syria. For years, they conducted airstrikes on the rebels, but this time, Moscow could not muster enough forces. It was busy fighting Ukraine. Its forces were stretched. The most that Russia could do was offer asylum, so Assad and his family have fled to Russia. Moscow says it does not betray its friends, but it has accepted the regime change. This was the Syrian embassy in Russia, in Moscow. They were raising Syria's new flag, the opposition flag. Even Assad's new home understands that his reign is over. And what about the Russian bases in Syria? What happens to them? Well, Moscow does not know yet. The Kremlin spokesperson said it was premature to talk about them. The Russian forces there are reportedly taking precautions in case they're attacked. The world sees this as a Russian loss, at the very least, a major loss of face. In fact, look at this post from Donald Trump, the next US president. Trump says, and I'm quoting, "They lost all interest in Syria because of Ukraine, where close to 600,000 Russian soldiers lay wounded or dead." Russia and Iran are in a weakened state right now, one because of Ukraine and a bad economy, the other because of Israel and its fighting success. That brings me to the next big loser, Iran. Tehran has lost a major ally in the region. They supported Assad's regime with a network of proxies in West Asia, proxies like the Lebanon-based Hezbollah. These were Assad's elite boots on the ground, the troops who pushed the rebels back. But Hezbollah has been severely weakened due to the war with Israel. They could not help Assad this time around. Neither could other Iranian proxies.
No request for assistance was ever made to us. It was fundamentally the responsibility of the Syrian army. We did not consider it our duty, nor did the Syrian government assign us any role, as it was an internal Syrian matter, its relationship with its own opposition groups and its own people.
So Iran is trying to play it cool, saying it wasn't even asked for help this time, and that the blame for Assad's fall lies with the Syrian army. But the Syrian people aren't buying it. They stormed the Iranian embassy in Damascus yesterday, leaving a trail of destruction behind. By the looks of it, Iran has lost an ally, and this weakens its position in West Asia. Syria gave Iran a land corridor all the way to Lebanon, to the borders of Israel. Now Tehran will have to deal with potentially hostile forces in between. The land corridor is shut. And so is Iran's ability to project power. And Iran's proxies will be watching all of this. They will take note. They see that Tehran could not defend a key ally. They may start doubting Iran's ability to support them. So Iran has lost face, and so has Russia. It wasn't a direct military blow to either, but a blow to their prestige. Let's see how they recover from this. Now, the regime change may have happened in Damascus, but the aftershocks are being felt in Tehran. Make no mistake, this is a body blow for Iran. They had just one state ally in the region, and that was Bashar al-Assad. The rest are armed groups and ragtag militias like the Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Houthis in Yemen. So Assad's ouster is a big setback for the Iranian regime. Their foreign minister put the blame on Assad's army. He said they failed in their duty.
The Syrian army failed to carry out its duty. We were never supposed to replace the Syrian army in resolving their domestic affairs or fighting the opposition. Our battlefield presence in Syria was for fighting the ISIS and was ended after IS was defeated. We were also there to support the resistance.
So Iran says it wasn't our fight, which is frankly a plain lie. Iran's support to Assad is well documented. In 2012, their top military officers visited Syria. They found Assad's regime teetering, and that's when Tehran decided to intervene. They have invested between $30 and $50 billion in Syria. They've also deployed thousands of fighters, and not just their own. Iran has also convinced, or did convince, Hezbollah to send their men. So Tehran cannot distance itself from this debacle. It's very much their failure, and it could not have come at a worse time. Iran's regional axis is already weakened. In Gaza, Hamas is out of power. Israel has dismantled most of their capabilities. Up north in Lebanon, Hezbollah is also struggling. Reports say they lost some 4,000 fighters in the war with Israel, plus a number of top leaders. Israel took them out with pager bombs. These were all major blows to the Iranian regime, but Assad's fall is more devastating than all of this. And I'll give you two reasons why. Number one, Assad was a president. He had legitimacy, unlike Iran's other proxies. And number two, Syria's location. It was the link between Iran and its proxies. Look at the map. From Iran, weapons and supplies would go to Iraq. From Iraq, the supplies would enter Syria. And from Syria, they would enter Lebanon. That's where the Hezbollah would collect them. Now, I know what you're thinking. If Assad was so important, why did Iran not help him? The obvious explanation is they were too stretched. Hezbollah was busy with the war, and Iran was focused on Israel, so neither party could spare the support. It has revealed a major weakness of the Iranian regime, their inability to protect their allies. Consider what happened to former Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh. He was killed inside Tehran. And now another ally has been left to his fate. This is probably the weakest Iran's regime has looked in decades, both internally and externally. Inside Iran, there is discontent about the economy. Outside, its regional axis is fading. So what can the regime do? A lot of experts fear a nuclear escalation. The UN atomic watchdog raised the alarm last week. It said Iran is planning to increase its stockpile of nuclear weapons-grade uranium. And the logic is quite simple here. The Axis was Iran's tool of deterrence and power projection. They spent many years building it up. If that axis weakens, Iran needs an alternative, another tool to deter and scare its rivals, which could be nuclear weapons. In the meantime, expect escalation from Iran's remaining proxies, especially the Houthis in Yemen. On Monday, they fired drones at central Israel. One of them struck a home in the city of Yavne. So Iran does have options to keep up the fight, but what they choose could also depend on Israel and Donald Trump. Netanyahu has always talked about toppling the Iranian regime. He may sense an opportunity here.
Assad's regime is a central link in Iran's axis of evil. This regime has fallen. This is a direct result of the blows we inflicted on Iran and Hezbollah, the main supporters of Assad's regime. This created a chain reaction throughout the Middle East.
He's talking about a chain reaction, but if that reaction reaches Tehran, expect them to lash out. The next year, all eyes will be on Donald Trump, on whether he imposes more sanctions on Iran, and if he does, the regime will fear internal discontent, which is another recipe for instability. It's been a very bad year for Iran and its allies in West Asia. But at this point, 2025 could be worse. It's time for the world to strap in because the Donald Trump era is here again. Forget niceties and protocols. We are seeing the Trump playbook of diplomacy, which is trolling the weak. Let me show you his recent message on social media. I'm quoting, "It was a pleasure to have dinner the other night with Governor Justin Trudeau of the great state of Canada. I look forward to seeing the governor again soon so that we may continue our in-depth talks on tariffs and trade." It's not a parody account, we checked. This is the next US president. He's calling Canada a state of the United States, and he's calling Justin Trudeau a governor. It's not the best way to engage with your neighbor, but when that neighbor is Justin Trudeau, I guess it doesn't really matter. And the joke is not new. It started last month when Trudeau flew down to Florida. He met Donald Trump over dinner to discuss tariffs. Now, to give you some background, Trump is threatening a 25% tariff on Canadian imports. He says drugs and migrants are pouring in through the Canada border. And his solution? To threaten Canada with tariffs. Justin Trudeau says these tariffs will kill his economy, and he's not wrong. Around 75% of Canada's exports go to the US, so a tariff is bad news for Trudeau. Just one problem, though. Donald Trump doesn't care. He cracked the same joke to Trudeau last month. He told him, if you can't pay the tariff, just join the United States, become the 51st state of America. Of course, that was behind the scenes, away from cameras or social media. But this time, Donald Trump has mocked Justin Trudeau in front of the whole world. It tells you a couple of things. One, Trump is quite tuned into the internet. He clearly saw the chatter around his comments, which is why he joined in. And two, he's showing Canada who's boss. Trump wants the world to know that he's negotiating from a position of strength, that he doesn't care what Trudeau thinks. It's certainly unconventional, but will it be successful? Canada has not reacted to Trump's remarks, but Trudeau did speak about the tariffs yesterday. He hinted at retaliatory actions.
And I think people south of the border are beginning to wake up to the reality that tariffs on everything from Canada would make life a lot more expensive for Americans. We will, of course, as we did 8 years ago, respond to unfair tariffs in a number of ways, and we're still looking at the right ways to respond.
It's a shameful episode for Trudeau and Canada. He's been trolled, his country has been insulted, and his office mocked. Any self-respecting leader would have reacted by now. Just look at Mexico. Trump has given them the same warning: fix the border or face 25% tariffs. And listen to how Mexico's president reacted.
Nos vamos a poner de acuerdo.
We will defend our sovereignty and respect Mexicans, respect Mexico and the collaboration a government must have with another government and a trade partner with another trade partner, especially such important trade partners.
Respect Mexicans and respect Mexico. Look at the difference in messaging. We don't expect Mexico to take the fight to Trump. Chances are they will come around, but your attitude matters. Trudeau had no issues picking a fight with India. He accused the government of India of killing a Khalistani terrorist. He also expelled Indian diplomats from Canada, all of this with zero evidence. But now that same Justin Trudeau is pandering to Donald Trump. If you are a Canadian, you should be enraged today. You should question Trudeau's hypocrisy. And if you're a world leader, you should take note of Trump's strategy. He has not changed since 2021. If anything, he's more brazen. So be prepared for threats and intimidation, maybe even trolling and insults. And most importantly, perhaps download Truth Social. It's Donald Trump's own social media app. It's where he posts all his wild ideas and promises. If you don't have it, you may miss a trade war or two. Nobody likes picking sides. It's often a tough and uncomfortable decision, but in some cases it's obvious. Like when there's a murder or a terror attack, the assumption is you side with the victim. But turns out that's not always the case. Last week, the CEO of United Healthcare was shot dead in New York. His name was Brian Thompson. He led one of the biggest insurance firms in America. His killer is a 26-year-old man, Luigi Mangione. The cops couldn't arrest him from the crime scene. All they had was a CCTV photo, so naturally they released the picture online. The hope was that someone would see him and tip them off. But guess what happened? Some internet users found the assassin cute. They began thirsting over his smile. If you think that's weird, buckle in. Luigi was finally arrested on Monday from a McDonald's in Pennsylvania. Someone spotted him there and alerted the cops. Again, guess what happened next? Internet users began dropping negative reviews for that McDonald's. They called the staff rats and snitches. Why? Because they tipped off the police. And it doesn't end here. The bullet casings used by Luigi were engraved. They said, deny, defund, and depose. Those words are linked to a book published in 2010, a book that criticized the health insurance industry. Once again, guess what happened next? People are selling merchandise with those very words. You can find it on Amazon. T-shirts that say, deny, defund, and depose. Mugs, hats, pint glasses, all of them with the same wording. On social media, sympathy is pouring in for the shooter. He's become a sort of a hero, a man who stood up to the insurance industry. Meanwhile, the CEO is getting the stick, the man who's dead. Some users say he got what he deserved. What explains these topsy-turvy emotions? Well, first of all, let me say this. You must never condone violence. Killing someone is never the answer to any problem. This CEO had a wife and two sons, a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old. They had nothing to do with the insurance issues or the health care reforms. All they know is that their father is dead. And that's not something to celebrate. Having said that, it does raise some questions. A recent survey looked at healthcare in 10 high-income nations. The United States came in dead last. Around 53% Americans do not like their healthcare system, and with good reason. Most insurers use a vetting process. They call it prior authorization. Say you're getting a medical procedure or you've been prescribed a medicine, the insurers won't automatically cover it. They will first check whether the service or drug is necessary. Only then will they pay for it. And insurers are misusing this tactic. Prior authorizations were used 46 million times in 2022. That's up from 37 million times in 2019. And this is not for the general population. This is for people aged 65 and above, and also specially abled people. Even after this vetting, approval is not guaranteed. United Healthcare, for example, denied almost 9% of the requests. And don't forget the delays. All of this vetting consumes valuable time. 94% doctors said that this process delayed care. 78% said it led to patients abandoning treatment. And 25% said it led to adverse events in patients. If you go online, you can find many such stories. Doctors prescribing medicines or procedures only for insurers to deny it. So there is genuine anger against insurance firms. They have been taking Americans for a ride. Around 18% Americans have taken loans for medical treatment. Their collective debt is $220 billion. This is not unique to America. These problems exist elsewhere as well, including in India. But frankly, it is unacceptable for a country like the US, a country that spends almost $900 billion on its military. So questions are going to be asked, not just of insurance companies and their CEOs, but also politicians. A handful of companies dominate American healthcare. They protect their interests by lobbying politicians. Reports say there are some 3,000 health lobbyists in the United States. They spent a total of $700 million last year. That money is keeping reforms at bay. So America's insurance problems go far beyond one company or one CEO. It stems from a broken system. Outraging on the internet will not fix it. Neither will celebrating the killing of a man. For thousands of years, humanity has searched for answers, answers hidden in the fabric of the universe. We built tools. Then came modern machines and even supercomputers. All of them had one goal: to solve the puzzles of our world. But some problems were too vast, seemingly impossible. Well, at least until recently, because now Google seems to have an answer. It has unveiled a new chip called Willow. Now, Willow is not like any other chip we know. It's a quantum chip. In simpler words, it can solve a problem that none of our supercomputers can. And Google claims to have tested this chip. Willow was given a problem. It took five minutes to solve it. Do you know how the fastest supercomputer fared? It would take 10 septillion years to solve the same problem. 10 septillion, that's 1 followed by 24 zeros. That's 10 septillion. That is more than the age of our universe. So you get how fast Willow is. And for Google, this is a major breakthrough, the first in this field in nearly 30 years. But does the world really need such machines? What exactly is quantum computing? How can it change the way we live? For the answers, you'll have to brace for a science lesson. We'll try to keep it simple. Imagine your regular computer like a librarian. Your computer is like a librarian, a very, very smart librarian. You ask them a question, they start flipping through the books. As a librarian, your computer can only look at one book at a time. But quantum computers are very different. They're like a magical librarian. They can look at a lot of books simultaneously. Your quantum computing librarian can read every page of every book at once, all at the same time. That's how it works. So will quantum computers replace our normal computers? The answer is no. Quantum computers are not designed for daily work. They're designed to solve big problems, problems that are too tough for our computers to handle. For instance, a new medicine. Scientists go through millions of chemicals. They run all sorts of simulations to find the perfect formula that will cure a disease, and that is when a new medicine is created. A normal computer would take years to do this, but a quantum computer can analyze the possibilities way faster. It can get it done in a matter of hours. And that makes its potential limitless. Imagine predicting the weather with absolute accuracy, or designing new medicines in a matter of days, or making artificial intelligence smarter, or building new technology that we haven't even imagined yet. Quantum computers can do all of it and more. It's like opening a Pandora's box of ideas, which is why countries are investing in it. The United States is considered as the world leader in quantum computing. Their government is pushing for advanced technology. And so are private companies like Google. But in terms of money, China takes the cake. It has the highest investment in quantum technology, around $15 billion. Then there are the likes of Europe and Japan. They have poured in a lot of money in quantum technology. And then there's India, which is also trying to build a quantum ecosystem, investing nearly $500 million in it. But as they say, with great power comes great responsibility. The rise of quantum computing also brings challenges. The first one is viability. Take Google's Willow chip, for instance. It's powerful, but it is a largely experimental device. You cannot use it to solve real-world problems, at least not yet. Maybe not even the next decade. That's the first problem. Problem number 2 is logistics. Quantum chips use something called qubits. They're incredibly fragile. They need very cold temperatures to function. Also, they have very high error rates. Willow 2 was not error-free. And the third is the question of security. Quantum computers are very, very powerful. They can break encryption codes. These are codes that keep your information private. But now they can be compromised. And companies are already scared about this. In February, Apple made an announcement. It was making its iMessage encryption quantum-proof. This is to stop future computers from reading them. That time has not come yet, but quantum computing is no longer the stuff of science fiction. It is here, brimming with possibilities. The Willow chip has given us a glimpse, a look into what the future might hold. But as we stand at the edge of this revolution, it's important that we tread carefully. The real question is not what quantum computers can do. The real question is what we choose to do with them. Now let's talk about Jack Ma, China's most famous businessman. He's made a comeback from the wilderness. Jack Ma made a rare public appearance yesterday. He addressed employees at the Ant Group in China. He's the co-founder of the Ant Group. This is a financial services company. It runs the popular digital payment platform Alipay in China. The Ant Group has completed 20 years in business, and Jack Ma was there to rally the troops. He expressed hope for the future. He said that AI is a big opportunity for the company. Nothing extraordinary in his speech. And yet it's making headlines because this story is not about the speech. It is about Jack Ma himself and his return to the mainstream. He's not the same man anymore, though. Not too long ago, Jack Ma used to perform Hollywood-style concerts for his staff. It was as if he was living up to his reputation as the undisputed rock star of China's tech ecosystem. But 4 years ago, he was cut to size by Beijing. Jack Ma had a run-in with the Chinese state. He criticized China's financial watchdogs and banks. He said China's banks operate with a pawn shop mentality. The truth did not sit well with China's decision makers, especially Xi Jinping. Jack Ma had a falling out with the Chinese president. That's a mortal enemy to have if you live in China. So, of course, it set off a chain reaction. The Ant Group was about to list on the stock exchanges. It would have been a blockbuster IPO, the biggest one in the world. The Ant Group's listing was worth $37 billion. Jack Ma himself would have benefited immensely. He would have been richer by $27 billion, but the Chinese state nuked the listing. They cracked down on the Ant Group. The company was restructured. Jack Ma had to give up control, and after that, he disappeared. His whereabouts were unknown for a long time. Reports said that he lived in Japan for a while. Then he was seen in Australia and Thailand. Safe to say he was avoiding the spotlight. Perhaps staying below the radar was the only way to save his business. And now the man is back in the public sphere and apparently in Xi Jinping's good books too. Earlier this year, he wrote to Alibaba employees. Alibaba was Jack Ma's first big breakthrough. It's an e-commerce website like Amazon, and now he's given a pep talk to the employees of Ant Group. This is not happening out of the blue. All these engagements have been carefully orchestrated because China needs billionaires like Jack Ma. It needs to showcase them, to project economic stability. By showing him, China is trying to send a message to overseas investors that the disruption is over and a course correction has begun. This is the narrative that China wants to promote. And billionaires like Jack Ma are mere tools, ambassadors of Beijing's latest campaign. His face lends credibility to this message. And he would most likely not mind. Jack Ma is getting out of the crosshairs of Xi Jinping. In return, China gains a trusted influencer to rebuild investor confidence. It's a win-win. And this is not a unique case. It's not just Jack Ma. Richard Liu has also been rehabilitated. He's the founder of JD.com, another e-commerce giant of China. So Beijing is warming up to its billionaires again. But does this rehabilitation scheme extend to everyone? We ask because in recent years, several top executives have vanished. There have been dozens of such cases, a dozen such cases in fact. No explanation was given and their whereabouts remain unclear. China has also cracked down on foreign businesses. Firms like Bain & Company and the Mintz Group have been raided. Foreign executives have been stopped from leaving China. Exit bans have risen by 8 times. The country is not seen as business-friendly anymore. In fact, the US has called China uninvestable. So Jack Ma's performances won't help beyond a point. This is no longer about optics. Are Chinese companies and businesses investable? Can they operate without a target on their back? Do billionaires feel safe in China? These are the questions that that are being asked today, and Beijing refuses to answer them. It needs solid policies to repair its economy. Instead, it has resorted to an influencer campaign. Perhaps Jack Ma understands this too, but by voicing his thoughts, he won't make the same mistake twice. Now let's turn our attention to the Caribbean, where Haiti has been rocked by gang violence again. This weekend, there was a massacre in the capital city of Port-au-Prince. Nearly 200 people were slaughtered with machetes, knives and guns, all because of a priest who said voodoo was being practiced in a neighborhood. This incident has worsened Haiti's spiraling security crisis, which has left at least 5,000 people dead this year and displaced more than 700,000. But why is the Haitian government failing to control these violent gangs, and what will become of this crisis? Here's a report.
This is Wharf Jeremy, a sprawling slum in Haiti's capital city of Port-au-Prince. It's one of the poorest, most densely populated, and violent neighborhoods in the Caribbean nation. This weekend, it was rocked by a spike in gang violence. The massacre killed at least 184 people. And it was all thanks to a gang leader's personal vendetta. His name is Monel Felix. His son had a fatal illness, so Felix consulted a priest who blamed voodoo for the child's illness. Now, voodoo practices the belief that all living things have spirits. While it's largely misunderstood in Western pop culture, it's one of Haiti's official religions. But even though voodoo is a recognized faith here, it doesn't always have the best reputation. So, on Friday night, Felix set out to seek his supposed revenge against witchcraft, and the killings began. His gang killed at least 60 people in Wharf Jeremy. On Saturday, the child died from the illness. So, grieving or not, gang members paid the neighborhood another visit. They declared round 2. Using machetes and knives, they killed dozens of people. Most of the victims were over the age of 60. Older people who practiced voodoo were targeted and slaughtered. In some homes, 5 or 6 people were killed. Wharf Jeremy is a near impenetrable gang stronghold in the capital. The police generally don't go there, and law enforcement is severely lacking. So people from outside the neighborhood, like motorcycle and taxi drivers, intervened to save people, but they too were gunned down and killed. While mutilated bodies are still being burned in the streets, at least 184 people have been declared dead by the UN. But experts predict that the actual figure is much higher, pushing the overall death toll in Haiti's spiraling security crisis to at least 5,000.
The situation is getting much more critical. We've seen a growing number of internally displaced, now getting to over 700,000 in the country.
Haiti has been embroiled in gang violence since early this year, when rival gangs banded together and attacked government institutions, including police stations, prisons and hospitals. Since then, bloodshed has continued. Last month was particularly deadly for Haiti. 3 US airliners were struck by gunfire at the Port-au-Prince airport. The airport is still closed. Meanwhile, the government has been racked by political infighting, and the UN-backed police force, led by the Kenyan police, is severely under-resourced. So the government has struggled to contain the violent gangs whose power is only growing. And this weekend's massacre is a grim reminder that Haiti's problems are far from over.
The holiday season is upon us, and it inevitably brings with it two things: an overdose of hot chocolate and endless reruns of the movie Home Alone. Among the film's highlights is a brief cameo by none other than Donald Trump. The protagonist, Kevin McAllister, asks him for directions, and Trump points to the lobby. It says, "Down the hall and to the left." Decades later, that scene was recreated by social media. This time, replacing Kevin was Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He may not be wearing the hat, but he was also asking Trump for some directions, maybe directions on how to end the war. The internet did what it does best, turned it into a meme. Take a look.